It may be St Paddy's Day today, but the Geordies from Newcastle need absolutely no excuse to crack open a couple of cold ones and get on it. After yesterday, their 70-year trophy drought was ended at Wembley in absolute scenes. Today, we are going to go through it all. We're going to talk about the win, what happened, what went right. Then we are going to look at what is ahead or what could be ahead for Newcastle. And finally, we're going to talk about the squad, the manager and the ownership. Are they set up for future success? Let's get cracking. Newcastle fans, if you are here for the first time, but in particular, drop us a follow. Make sure you're subscribed. Let's get cracking. Jamie, we'll come to you first. What did you make of the final? Obviously, it was a great game, bit of drama. Did you expect this level, though, of performance from Newcastle?
So with the finals, when you come to them, they can either eat you up and the occasion's too much for you, or that's what gets you going. There's no bigger game than a cup final. Like, there might be other cups that are bigger, but it doesn't matter. It's a cup final. That's what you want to be playing for as a footballer. So these games can either eat you up, where you go in the shell of yourself because you're just a fear of losing, or they get you going. And Newcastle, it got them going, didn't it? They were on it from the first sort of couple of minutes, really. You saw the game, you're thinking, okay, Liverpool might dictate the ball a bit more here and there, which they kind of did, but Liverpool didn't do anything with it. And when Newcastle had the ball, they were on Liverpool. And Liverpool didn't have a chance to rest, really. So I think it was a very good performance, where I think the sort of defeat 3 years ago against United actually helped them, because they'd had that occasion, lost, they come back and going, right, we did this wrong, let's not do that again. So I think it worked out perfectly for them. That's kind of everything that went right for Newcastle, just kept going for them. One thing I did see, interestingly, sort of like tactics wise, was it got mentioned before the game when Slot came over to interview with Sky Sports. They said that Newcastle set up in a 4-3-3 at home when they played Liverpool, but at Liverpool they played over 4-4-2. So different tactics, not to give anything away. And Eddie Howe was asked after the game, was that intentional because of the cup final? And he said yes. He said, we had a game plan for the final, and I didn't want to show it away at Anfield. Now, if that doesn't go right for you, you get crucified because you've lost both games and you've made a stupid tactical sort of, doesn't work. But when it works out, you look an absolute genius. And that's what Eddie Howe looks like, an absolute genius for sort of the tactics he played. And it's absolutely brilliant occasion for him.
Yeah, I think to add to that as well, just in terms of who they beat, they knocked Chelsea, they knocked us out, they knocked Arsenal out, and then they beat Liverpool in the final. So they've destroyed 3 of the current top 4 in the Premier League to get this win. So they have absolutely deserved it and absolutely earned it the right way. And I didn't know that about the tactics. That's brilliant from Eddie Howe. Reece, what did you make of the final, particularly from a Newcastle standpoint, first of all?
Yeah, I mean, Newcastle dominated every aspect of the game. I think the only stats they probably didn't dominate were the goalkeeper saves and the fouls, which is what you would expect for the winning team. You know, you expect the team that are playing poorer to have to make more saves and commit more fouls. I look back to their final in 2023 against Man United, and definitely a lot of lessons were learned there. You know, Man United dominated Newcastle on that day, to be fair. And I think Newcastle fans, I remember, like I was saying, is they were treating the cup final like a day out, which immediately to me is a sign that you're going to lose. You know, everything's all about the cup final, you know, everyone's having a good time, and then you forget there's an actual football match going on. Didn't feel like that this time around. I remember Eddie Howe in the pre-match interview said, you know, he's not got the hotel by Wembley anymore. They're just a bit further out. So they couldn't focus. They couldn't get soaked up on it. The Newcastle fans looked ready. Wasn't that vibe like there was last time. So I thought Liverpool were going to win, but I thought, hang on here. The mentality's changed. And that switch was evident on the pitch from the very first minute. They battered them. They battered Liverpool. Yeah, Liverpool got their goal, but they weren't coming back into this game. You know, they thrashed them. Absolutely thrashed them. We thought Liverpool losing to PSG might have been you know, they're going to take their aggression out here on Newcastle, and they didn't. Didn't even get a look in. Salah was absolutely nowhere. That was an absolute thrashing, and it was fully deserved from the first minute to the last. Every player on that pitch, celebrating every throw in, every corner, everything. They dominated them. They've got the players there to deliver. Dan Burn at 6'7", getting those heads in. Isaac just is a natural finisher. And players there that care's not the right word, because players do care. They ooze what Newcastle's about. Bruno, Joelinton, Tonali had a good game as well. It was outstanding performance, actually. And I think we could talk about how bad Liverpool are, but that's because Newcastle was so good. Absolutely tactical masterclass from, as I said before, from the best coach in the league. Pep Guardiola is a manager / coach. There's a difference there before people do jump down my throat. He is the best coach in the league, and he showed that yesterday.
Yeah, and look, we've said how good Newcastle are. We have got to mention Liverpool performance. Reece, you mentioned Salah, if I'm not mistaken. His record in finals now is under a bit of scrutiny, and potentially rightly so, for a player who this season has been nothing short of sensational. I think the record stands at 11 finals and just 2 goals, and both of those goals have been penalties. So, when your big players don't turn up in the final, you're going to struggle to win. And they struggled yesterday to score. Like, they literally, I think it was until the added time in the first half, they created 0 XG. They had no shots. And for a team who are overwhelming favourites, basically wrapped up the Premier League title, it's kind of shocking. Liverpool looked like the team who hadn't won a trophy for 70 years, and the whole sense of the occasion just completely overwhelmed them. It was really strange to see. And yeah, the PSG loss, we all openly said it seems more of a catalyst for Liverpool to bounce back. So Liverpool fans, if you're watching, I mean, what do you guys think? Drop us a comment below. But is this the start of a downfall? I don't know.
I mean, in Liverpool's defence, like, they've won it. They were the holders of the competition. They've won it twice in 3-4 years? Made the final again. As a player, even though you want to win every trophy, as a player, I can imagine they know they're going to get another chance. They're light years ahead in the Premier League, for example. So it's not the worst thing for them. Yeah, they played poorly, but it's not like this would have been 10 years ago where they might have thought, when are we ever going to get to another one? They've been to loads. So it's not the worst thing in the world. Like, Liverpool fans didn't seem too disheartened yesterday.
No. I think the players were relatively classy in defeat. And they've been there, they've done it a million times, right? So I do agree with that point. It wasn't as big a deal to them. But I think when you couple that with the Champions League exit, it's not, it's not great.
I think really it doesn't put a damper on Liverpool's season, because they weren't expecting to win the league at the start of the season anyway. But once they got into this position before the PSG game, 1-0 up, and then they've got the home leg next, then they're playing Newcastle, which, Newcastle hadn't won a trophy before 70 odd years. You favour them to go through in the Champions League and to win the cup. And the fact that they've gone out of the Champions League and lost the cup final is a bit of a damper on the sort of spirits. But Liverpool fans, I think, were coming out going, you know what, we're still going to win the league. That's a good enough season for them. And it is.
Yeah.
Like, you got to remember, like, we're all still expecting them to win the league. And that's a good enough season. I'd take it as a City fan. I think we'd all take it just to win the Premier League. Next season, if I go, you can win the Premier League, but nothing else, you'd probably bite my hand off.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter, because they can win them, because they're probably going to win the league. But if they weren't, then there'd be a bit more of a concern around Liverpool. And the fact is, obviously, like, there's contract issues. Well, not issues, but still not solved with Trent, with Van Dijk, with Salah. So it's kind of them things that would make it probably a bit more of a downer on Liverpool if they weren't going to win the league. But they've had, a tough week. It happens to every great team. It's like, I remember, I know this is going back to City, who aren't involved, but it's sort of when we did our Centurion season, I think it was a week or 2 week spell where just everything went wrong. We lost to United. We lost in a cup game, and I think it's like things happen in the season. You're not going to have it all plain sailing the whole way through, no matter how good you are. So it's just Liverpool's little blip, and they've got a good enough point advantage to not have to worry about it in the end.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Actually, I think that will certainly cheer them up on the journey home, knowing they've basically got that locked up. Let's move back on now to Newcastle. So this as we've said, first trophy in 70 years. We know they've got the investment, and this does feel like a bit of a turning point, or the start of something. And Newcastle fans will rightly think this is the start of something special. I guess do we think this is the real launch? And look, we've always said it, right? The League Cup is a launching pad to greater things. So I guess question one, do we actually think this is going to be a launching pad for Newcastle? And what is next for Newcastle? And Jamie, maybe start with you, because you made a good point of saying you felt like Newcastle were the underdogs clearly anyway, right? But how quickly could that narrative around them change? And obviously there's comparisons to City when they won their first trophy. How quickly are we going to see that narrative shift from this being an underdog story and incredible to, right, Newcastle are now expected to start winning trophies?
So it can. So yeah, the comparison is City when they won the FA Cup against Stoke. It was sort of like that was our catalyst to become the team have become winners. They've won their first trophy under the club. They get that success, they want more. And that's exactly what Newcastle need to be thriving for. But there's no right to it. If they're going to do it, they've got to spend wisely, not lose their big players, and it's still doing everything right. And you've got to go and earn it. It's like the first one's always the toughest, but the first cup is the toughest for them because they're not won in 70 years. Now it'd be the first league title's the toughest. City won their first league title with the Aguero moment. You couldn't get tougher than that because we only won on goal difference. So it's a big slog of a season. So it can happen for Newcastle that this could be like, boom, we've won a trophy. That's got the momentum now to push on, start challenging for the title. But I think it's not straightforward. It's not going to be next season we expect them to go and fight for the title. It's still going to take a bit of progress from them. So I know I've seen a few sort of drunken Newcastle fans get carried away going, we're now going to win the Premier League. We're now going to win the Champions League. But that's obviously in high spirits and, they're on their cloud nine high kind of thing. But it's still, I don't know how to put it, but it's sort of like there's still a long way to go before they're expected to win the title. And that's why they need to sort of progress on this. It's next season, it's even in the rest of this season, go and get Champions League football, get in that top 4, top 5. Then it's pushing on from there. Sign a few players who are going to turn us into an even better side, and then pushing for the top 2, fighting for the title, getting a title challenge at least. I think that's what progresses and puts Newcastle on the next level which we have seen from City.
Yeah, just to jump in, and this might be an unpopular opinion, Newcastle fans, obviously let us know your thoughts, but we're talking about the Champions League. We know before their experience in the Champions League wasn't great. It was a bit underwhelming. Do they need Champions League football next season? Because I would make the case that Europa is a better step for them in terms of a bit more linear progress, in terms of, maybe a bit of an Arsenal situation where you don't want to raise the bar of expectations too quickly, where you're now looking at Arteta going, oh, wait, hold on. If they do it slow and steady, if they get in Europa, you would fancy them in the Europa League. They'd be amongst the favourites, I'd argue. Is that a better stepping stone to do it that way? And obviously, look, they're not going to take their foot off they're not going to take their foot off the pedal, and they're not going to settle for Europa. But Newcastle fans, would they be happy with Europa as a realistic next step to go, right, One, we actually back ourselves to win this. Two, that then can get us to the Champions League if we win it. Because if you put them in the Champions League now, do we think they're going to win it? No.
Well,
That's what I'd argue.
I think that'd be a different scenario for them because, like you said, they're possibly expected to win it. They'd be one of the favourites. That's an added pressure. When you're expected to win something, that's an added pressure. It's sort of like, I know Chelsea in the Conference League, we're all expecting them to win it. Now, you're sort of, it's an extra pressure because actually, if there was no pressure on Chelsea, they would go and absolutely piss that. They'd go and win it, no problem at all. But because there's that pressure on there, there is still that sort of, it's still not going to go like absolutely smoothly for them. You probably are going to win it because I think you are the best team by quite a big distance. But the expectation makes it harder. Whereas if they get the Champions League football, I think it'd be better for them because they can sign the better players. The better players want to play in the Champions League, and with the extended format now, even more teams are in it, so even more players want to join it.
Yeah, that's fair. Reece, what do you think could be next or should be next for Newcastle?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think what the Carabao Cup or the League Cup, as it's traditionally known, is always a good springboard. I think you'd argue that, George, when Mourinho first took over, that was his first trophy for Chelsea. Launched him into that new thing. Players that may have never won before. Once you win one, you want to win another, right? It's you finally get that monkey off your back, that success. You can do it. It strives you to achieve. Of course, some clubs that do go on to win it tend to slump in that part of the season because they seem to have maybe settled or they're happy. They need to be careful of not doing that. However, the game has changed now. They're not under their previous ownership. They have a lot more money available to them, a lot more resources, but there is also the limitations of PSR, FFP. But again, this works in Newcastle's favour because it's meant that Eddie Howe has built a squad of togetherness. He did it excellent at Bournemouth. They were in administration when he was with League Two with them, took them all the way to the Premier League. Obviously stopped off at Burnley in between, but he took them all the way there. A real football manager achievement in some ways. He's built a sense of togetherness there. Look at those players there, all fighting for each other. He's got some local lads in there with Lewis Miley and, of course, Dan Burn. He's got players that they could go down the route and go for superstars, but is that going to work? But on the flip side of that, sometimes you need those superstars for those real clutch moments.
I think that's a good point. Just, they had Trippier right back yesterday. They had Dan Burn in the mix as well, who's 32, if I'm not mistaken. They've got a bit of a combination of, and look, they didn't have Gordon as well. We know they didn't have Hall. So I do think they've done it in a way that is a nice balance of experience and youth.
Yeah, they've got an excellent balance of a squad. It's going to be tested in the summer. Clubs will sniff around Bruno. Clubs are going to sniff around Isaac. That's inevitable. Whether they want to go is a different thing, but with the money that will be on offer, will ease them around PSR because they've been hindered by PSR. You've of course got other factors as well. Look, Amanda Staveley, who was at the game yesterday, is looking at Tottenham. So there's going to be a factor of that. Will the lure of Tottenham, who will not be limited as much by PSR, will they look towards Eddie Howe? Will they look towards some of those players? I don't know. That's a story for another day. But they've got the monkey off their back. That's the important thing. It's getting the balance right. The balance they've got is key. It's if they're going to lose any players, how they're going to replace them. You've got to look for the same model of player. Take baby steps. Now that you've got one trophy, fans will inevitably expect. A flop next season isn't going to be good enough in a lot of people's eyes. And that's understandable. Because as Wenger once said, once you've had the taste of caviar, you don't want to go back to sausages. That's true. They're not going to want to go back there. And fans will start to become more expecting. But realistically, they have been competing. They made the cup final a couple of years ago. They're getting towards the latter stages of the FA Cup. They're competing towards the top four in the Premier League. So they're there. The foundations are there. I think it's just easing expectations. Take your time. Don't panic. You said take the Europa League, go on and win it because they've got the men, you've got the players to do it. They can beat anybody on their day, Newcastle. But as we've seen, they're also capable of losing to anybody. But they should be able to go on and do it. They've got the fan base for it. They've got the foundations there to achieve. Just take their time. Don't rush it. Even if it takes another 3 years, doesn't matter. Because they've done the first hurdle. That's the important thing. The mentality is now different. Watch them if they make another cup final. They'll be driving for that again. They'll be a worse nightmare for most teams. So yeah, it's all about pushing forward.
Yeah, and look, I think that brings us nicely onto our kind of final section about the leadership and squad. We've touched on it a little bit. Leadership, first of all, in terms of the manager, we have on this pod before over the probably last year or so questioned whether Eddie Howe is the right man. A lot of Newcastle fans said yes, he is. And is this Carabao Cup win proving he is the right man to take this Newcastle side to, you know, a European trophy one day, maybe to compete for the Premier League title? Do we think that first and foremost?
Yeah, I mean, look, they need to be careful not to take a leaf out of, you know, United's book when they won it 2 years ago because they got thrashed 7-0 by Liverpool in the next game. I don't think they will. I think they're better prepared than that. I didn't think Howe would win silverware with Newcastle. I thought he was the right man to be appointed at the time because, like I said, I think he can make a lot of players better. And he's done that. He's made a lot of these players absolute world beaters. I think you've got to stick with him. Realistically, who's going to take the job after him? Who is there out there that would go for it? Not in a disrespectful way, but a lot of managers will also have to consider, you know, moving there and blah, blah, blah. Stick with him now. And maybe, you know, and just bide your time. If you're knocking on the door and it's not going, then, you know, you can look for the next level. But right now, you can't. What else can you ask for? You know, he has done a world-class job and he's got harmony there that a lot of managers and coaches would rip your hand off for because he has got the right balance right now. And I really do hope it works out for them.
I don't think there's any way, like, there's no way anyone at the moment is looking past Howe at Newcastle because he's done something that no one's done in 70 years for him. So that's why you can't and you have to give him credit for it. And to be honest, I didn't think he'd win silverware either. I thought he would be the stopgap between someone else coming in and then them going to win trophies. But then it's now, it is. I agree with Reece. It's sort of like next season. What do they get? How do they do? Because, like I said before, the expectation is going to grow at Newcastle, and if you don't meet that expectation, fans will turn. They will sort of love you in sort of legacy sort of terms. You even got it with like Moyes, one West Ham, the European trophy, and they still got rid of him. They wanted to get rid of him the season after. It can happen because teams want to keep progressing, and if they feel like this manager has reached his end, they won't settle for it. But can Howe continue? I'm really not sure. It's sort of like I don't want to say no and I don't want to say yes. I know it's sitting on the fence, but it's kind of it. I think it depends how much they back him, if they're signing the right players, and because let's be honest, if they go in the summer and they lose Bruno G and maybe Isaac, it's not Howe's fault then, is it?
Yeah.
I don't expect them to lose both. I think if they are going to lose, it'll be one or the other at most. I don't think they will actually lose either. But if I'm just saying a scenario, if they lose one of them or both of them, Howe's team is worse off, and then the progression sort of slows down. So it depends on how Newcastle deal in the summer. I think is massively important and could stop Howe from progressing. But he's now given the taste of winning, so he is going to have that pressure, I think. And if he doesn't win anything or get to cup finals for the next 2 seasons, then I think Newcastle should then be looking to move him on. Really.
And I think the final challenge is really just making sure they keep the players in the summer, because you look at their squad and it's pretty good, I'd say. You know, it is a strong squad, great midfield, decent young wing backs, a phenomenal striker, as we know. But do we think in the summer, if you know, a Chelsea or an Arsenal go, here's 80, 90, 100 mil for Isak, would they sell him?
Not for
Well,
that little.
every player has a price. Let's be honest, Isaac's not going to waste his time going to Arsenal, is he? Because Eddie Howe's made more cup finals than Arteta has. Let's be blunt there. So he'd be mad to make that move. Chelsea, maybe a little bit different because I think they're a little bit more sustainable. But they'll have this idea in mind. They'll have replacements in mind. Eddie Howe will have say on these transfers. These are Eddie Howe signings. You know, I remember at Bournemouth when he did splash big on a certain player, it didn't quite work out. So he would have learned from that. And I think he's got everything in place to do that. If they lose Isaac, they'll have a player in place. Bruno, I think, is a bigger loss because he has symbolized everything about what the city of Newcastle is. Someone who's been to Newcastle, someone who knows people from Newcastle. He is exactly what they want. You can replace goals. I'm sorry, but you can. It's characters like Bruno that will be harder to replace. That would be his biggest challenge if he was to go. I think he'll stay, Bruno. I think, as we saw from his reaction yesterday, just how, you know, amazing he saw that experience. He stays. They've got more of a platform to build. Him going is more of a loss because I don't see Dan Burn is a personality, but I don't see his personality easily replaceable. You see it in football all the time. Vieira went, couldn't replace him. Keane goes, couldn't replace him. Yes, United was still successful, but you can't replace that sort of presence. But they'll get good money for him anyway. And there probably is a player out there. I'm sure they're already looking. Let's just make that clear.
I think the numbers you said there for Isak, Jordan, are too low for Newcastle. I've seen reports anyway saying 150 million is the only way you're going to even get to the table.
He's worth every penny, 150 million. Look, he performs in every game. He'll score against lower league. He'll score against the big dogs. He is the full package of a striker. If he stays fit, you've got a world beater there. What more do you want from your striker? He turns up in every opportunity. He turned up in a cup final. How many players fall when it comes to that crucial moment? You said about Salah's record. It doesn't matter because Liverpool's still winning. That's what makes him worth 150 million pounds. It really, really does. He, you know, you've got to spend the big bucks on him because he has shown he's a special talent.
Yeah, so but sort of just to add on what I was saying there, so 150 million, so that's a big money that they can then reinvest in other ways. The midfield three for them is so key for them. Joe Linton, Tonali, and Bruno G. And as Reece said about Bruno G, Tonali's also embracing it. Tonali's wife was in Covent Garden on Saturday, in the middle of the Geordies. They're taking photos with people, like not them asking photos for her. She's taking photos of the Geordies because she's loving it so much. So they're embracing it as well. And obviously, I don't remember if people heard the story when he first went. They booked a table at a Wetherspoons in the middle of Newcastle and just turned up randomly. So they're fully embracing it as well. So I don't think they will leave.
Sorry to bounce on that one with Tonali though. Yeah, I do agree. It's easy to embrace Newcastle. His only issue is he didn't want to leave AC Milan. He might get homesick. That's his only problem. I've heard apparently Juventus are interested, swapping with Douglas Luiz. Move to Juventus for him probably would be good, but at the same time, with the way they've been recently, probably not. But he's the only issue. I think he's I don't mean it horribly, but he is disposable right now, Tonali. But the fact that he has embraced Newcastle suggests he's probably there for the long run. I do agree, but I just think that's a point to make, that he might be someone who might be used in a swap deal or an easy way to generate some funds.
It might be. I think it'd be a shame for Newcastle if any of these do leave. I don't see them leaving. I think, to be honest, I think the way that it's been spoken about that Isak's like definitely leaving in the summer before this cup win was a very disrespectful to Newcastle. I know that the main link was with Arsenal, and Arsenal are a bigger club. Like, it's just a fact. But the way it was sort of going about of going, yes, it's going to happen, has been disrespectful to Newcastle. And I think this cup win them go, this is why you're staying at Newcastle, because we've built the project. Here's the first trophy. We're going to try and go on to bigger and better things. And that's the way I think it's going for them. So they've got, I just think the summer's so important for them, because if they do very little in the summer, I think that'd be a big mistake for them. And if they sell any of their big stars, it's also a big mistake for them. But I think hopefully for Newcastle fans, for them, they don't.
Yeah, and also when you look at the Premier League table this year, they've got a game in hand, and if they win that, they're fourth. So I think all in all, it's looking pretty good for Newcastle now, as long as they can hold on to their players in the summer. But that is all we've got time for this week. Newcastle fans, if you are watching through your 74 pints, please do make sure to hit us up in the comments. What do you want next? What do you expect next season? But as always, like, comment, and subscribe. You know the drill.